Welcome to Carren's Couch today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so excited that you did, because today it's a show for just you and me. I'm not inviting anybody else on the couch, and I'm not introducing any special guests, because today I wanted to share something with you that I guess has been a bit of a secret. It's been a bit of a secret, and it's been something that I've personally been working on for over about 2-3 years. Now, we've had plenty of shows on about diet and about food. And if you've been following Carren's Couch and you're an avid watcher of the show, you'll know that we've done plenty of shows since the day that we started around different diets and different philosophies and different ideas around what's best and how best to nurture our bodies. And if you've only just tuned in, make sure that you go back and watch some of the previous shows, because that will give you some explanations as to how we got to today. So today I want to talk to you about the secret. I want to talk to you about the secret of which diet is actually best. So how did I even come to this? How did I even arrive at this? Well, probably about 2 years ago, I started to understand that the way that I was eating food wasn't necessarily the best way. And I thought that everybody thought the same way that I did. I was convinced that everybody ate when they were bored. And I was convinced that everybody ate when they were procrastinating and when they felt emotional, or they felt sad, or they wanted to reward themselves if they did something really good. I thought everybody used food the way that I used food, until I discovered how wrong I was when I had a conversation with our production team about how they eat and why they eat. And two of our producers actually said, "Kazza, we don't care when we eat. We don't care what we eat, as long as when we want to eat, there is something there." And I thought, oh my goodness, who eats like that? If I don't have what I want, when I want it, how I want it, as often as I want it, and as much of it as I want, something is going to happen and someone is going to get hurt. So I decided to do a bit of research on the subject. I decided to dive into emotional eating. And guess what I discovered? Over 90% of the population are emotional eaters. Over 90%. And the other 10% of the population are said to eat for fuel. Now, having never eaten for fuel only, this was an absolute enigma to me. I had no idea that everybody just didn't think like I did. So it put me on a path of research, and it put me on a path of investigation, to look at what causes a person to eat emotionally and what are the consequences of that. And I really wanted to share that with you today, because if those statistics are right, 90% of the viewers of Carren's Couch, you're emotional eaters too. And I wanted you to feel like you weren't alone. So that's why today's conversation is just you and me, sunshine. So we're going to talk about emotional eating in the context of what causes us to eat. How do we know that we're emotional eaters? And then what can we do about that? So here's some of the things that you can think of in terms of identifying yourself as an emotional eater. First of all, are you somebody who has done the whole yo-yo diet? You know, and you've probably been doing it for most of your life. You're on the diet and then off the diet, and on the diet and then off the diet. And the results of the diet, at best, are temporary. You know, sometimes we do lose the weight. You know, we definitely do lose the weight, but then we put it back on again. And sometimes we put back even more weight than what we started with. And just about every diet that comes onto the marketplace, we've tried it. We've done the roller coaster. We've tried every fad, the Weight Watchers, the Jenny Craig, the Fit for Lifes, the Paleos, the Hunter-Gatherers, the oh gosh, well, what else is there? There's hundreds of them. The Atkins diets, the lemon detox, all of it, we've tried it. So we've been on this roller coaster for years. The results are temporary at best, but at worst, the results are self-defeating, because we end up feeling more, a greater lack of self-esteem than what we felt before. So we start using a diet as a stick to beat ourselves with, because we don't like the body that we're in. We don't like this. You know, I haven't liked the body that I'm in. I think I felt like I was fat since I was 8 years old. When I look back on photos, I remember thinking to myself, gee, look at you. You were just a pudgy little number. And I remember thinking of myself that way my whole life growing up, only to find that that was all in my own mind. And every time I'd look in the mirror, right up until about 2 years ago, every time I'd look in the mirror, I'd say to myself, I don't like what I see. I don't like it. That's fat. Those are thunder thighs. That's a big fat pudgy belly. I don't like it. I'm going on a diet. And you get out there and you pound those pavements and you run those hills and you lift those kettlebells. And I would use diet and exercise as a stick to beat myself with, purely because I didn't like myself. But because I didn't like myself, that would then drive me to eat more again. Every time I became emotional, I would eat more. And it was funny because every time I'd go to the cupboard, I would know, consciously, I would know, don't grab the chips, don't get the marshmallows, don't do it. You know you don't want it, you know you're going to get a fat butt, don't do it, don't do it. And I would watch my hand reach into the kitchen cupboard and grab out the snacks, and then I would binge. And even if I wasn't hungry, and most of the time I wasn't, I would inhale a whole bag of chips. You know those big ones? That had my name on it. A Rocky Road block of chocolate? Oh my goodness, nothing nicer than chocolate-covered marshmallows and Turkish Delight all mixed up in together. Cupcakes? Oh, look out, cupcakes. If there were cupcakes in the house, they better be scared because I'm on a vengeance. So I would spend my whole day looking for opportunities to eat, especially if I was emotional. So the kind of emotions that would grab me by the throat was boredom, was a big one. Whenever I felt like I was a little bit bored, straight to the cupcakes. If I got angry or frustrated with myself or with my work or the situation around me, oh, look out, chips. And even after dinner, even after I was full, I would always find a space for dessert. Does that sound like you? Does dessert go to a separate place in the tummy? Yeah, it does. That's exactly what I found. Even when I was stuffed and full, I'd still eat. Now, if any of those sound true to you, then chances are you're an emotional eater just like me. And emotional eating, you know, it's a hunger that comes on fast and it's got to be satisfied immediately. Not like normal hunger. Normal hunger comes on slowly, and it doesn't matter if you don't eat straight away. Normal physical hunger, it can wait. Now, if you're somebody who gets that hunger that needs to be satisfied straight away, chances are you're an emotional eater. And if you've been doing this for a long time, the kind of food that we reach for is always the sugary, starchy, fatty, salty, all those highly palatable processed foods that actually don't fill us up at all. All it does is make us feel a bit sick from it, but we're still hungry afterwards. So if that's the kind of food that you've been reaching for, you know what else? Here's the bad news. This is the natural byproduct that occurs from emotional eating. It's food addictions. See, what happens, and this is the part of the research that I've just found incredibly fascinating. What happens with food addictions is that there's a part of the brain called the reward center. And our people who've been studying drug addictions and obesity have actually found that people with drug addictions and people with obesity, the way that the chemicals interact inside of the brain and the way that the brain lights up is exactly the same. So now we're starting to realize that food actually is an addiction for some people, and some of us are more predisposed to it, and those of us that are emotional eaters are. So the brain, the way that it fires when we feed it all those highly palatable foods, the sugars and the starches and the fats and the salts, the brain gets excited. The brain lights up, and it lights up like a Christmas tree, and the reward center of the brain gets absolutely flooded with dopamine. Now, the dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is the feel good. It's the reward. It's the, oh my goodness, this is fantastic. It's the feel good hormone. But our brain is really clever. It knows that if it gets flooded too much with the one neurotransmitter, the receptor sites actually close down so that the brain doesn't receive so much of this neurotransmitter of dopamine that's being released. So it's very smart to protect itself. So those receptor sites actually shut down, which means what we used to get out of one cupcake, now we have to have 10 cupcakes to get the same sense of reward and the same sense of fulfillment. But this is the part where the addiction kicks in, because unfortunately our food companies, they've seen to it that they make these highly palatable processed foods filled with addictive substances. So we're kind of innocent in the process, you know. You can run, but you can't hide. It's going to get you in the end. So when we've got these addictions, now we're dealing with a reward center in the brain that's actually craving for this flood of dopamine because we're not getting the same kick out of one cupcake anymore. Now we've got to have 10. So now we start overeating. And the consequences of overeating is the leaky gut and the inflammation, and eventually it leads to autoimmune diseases. And the whole gamut of consequences is enormous. Do the research after you've finished watching the show and find out for yourself. Don't believe me, go and do the research and check it out, and you'll see that this emotional eating roller coaster is causing us so much internal suffering as well as external suffering. Purely because we're dealing with emotions that we haven't learned to reconcile. Now, we can talk about where all of these unreconciled emotions start from, but that's another show, I think. I think that's a whole other conversation about our childhood. But I figure, you know, we're mature adults now, and I figure that we can start to become aware and we can start to shine a light on the parts of our lives that are not serving us and that are not working for us. So instead of using diet and exercise as a stick to beat ourselves with, why don't we turn the tables on it? Why don't we flip it around and start to look at, well, if the diet and the exercise isn't working long term, why do I keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result? Obviously, there's something else in the puzzle that needs to be fixed. And that is our emotions first, to reconcile our emotions, which then allows us to clean up the addiction. Now, isn't it interesting to think that food can actually be addictive? It's a little bit frightening. And to think that all these processed foods, that there are additives and preservatives and flavorings that are designed to have you continue to consume them, that's a little bit frightening too, don't you think? And not only is it happening for you, but chances are our kids are consuming those same foods. And chances are our kids are being rewarded with food. You think about it. You know, our kids do something great, and probably the same thing happened for you when you were little. You did something awesome and you got a cookie. You do something that's not so great, or you fall over and you hurt yourself, you get a cookie. So we learn to see food as comfort and food as reward rather than food as fuel. And that is the bottom line, and the secret behind the diet roller coaster is that we have a relationship with food that has us think that it's comfort, but food was never, ever meant for that. Food was only ever meant to fuel the body. Love is meant for comfort. Love is meant for reward. Self-acceptance, self-love, self-esteem, that's meant for comfort, that's meant for reward, and that's what's meant for fulfillment, not food. Food is not the enemy. Yet I think that we've been treating food as the enemy. We've been treating food as the enemy our whole lives. Don't you love that the show's not edited and I can just make a mistake anytime I like? Thanks for staying tuned in. So food is not the enemy. And we can't possibly be the enemy. You know, this body has been hanging around from day one. It's never left you. It's never abandoned you. And it's been with you the whole time, trying to support you every step of the way. Isn't it time we turn the tables a little bit and stop doing the same thing, expecting a different result? Why don't we start to look internally and start to resolve our emotions first? Heal the addictions, and then all of a sudden, food serves the purpose that it was meant to serve. And because of all of this realization, it's been like a mind-blowing moment for me, where I've had this incredible epiphany, an amazing wake-up call, that we're trapped. Unless we learn how to have a new relationship with food, we're trapped. And of course, we're all doing the best we know how to, and if we knew how to do better, we would. So it's taken me down the path of creating an entirely new program called Eat with Ease. And it's all about learning how to resolve your emotions, because we're always going to have emotions, right? You know, you can't get rid of your emotions and you can't suppress them. And we're always going to have to eat. So that kind of throws a bit of conflict with that whole food addiction issue. So Eat with Ease is all about resolving the emotions, healing the addictions, and then treating food as fuel like it was always meant to. So hopefully, just this little quick snapshot of this week's show is enough to cause you to start to question the way that you eat. Next time you reach for something in the kitchen, ask yourself, did I get hunger pains or did I get some hunger grumbles first? Or am I eating purely for the sake of eating? Or am I eating because I'm bored? Or am I just not full? Because I think that's a big part of it. We eat to avoid being hungry. What's so bad about being hungry? Hunger is the body's natural mechanism that kicks in to tell us it's time to fuel ourselves. Yet, you know what? I have to be honest. I can't remember the last time that I was actually hungry before I started this program. So ask yourself that question. Am I hungry? And why am I eating? And then start to pay attention to what you're actually reaching for. Are you reaching for comfort foods, or are you reaching for foods that will be highly nutritious and fuel your body? Ask yourself those questions. Let us know what your answers are. Go to our Facebook page. I'd really love to hear what your thoughts are and where you sit. Are you an eater for fuel, or are you an emotional eater? So if you are either one of those, let us know. Because either way, I think it's a really compelling and a really interesting conversation. And don't worry, we're going to be talking more about the whole Eat with Ease process and overcoming emotional eating in future shows. So today's show is really just to whet your appetite and get you to start asking the question, where do you fit in those statistics? Go to our Facebook page and let us know. Facebook page is allthews.facebook.com/Carren's Couch. You can also post your comments on Carren's Couch website, which is allthews.carrenscouch.com. Let us know where you stand, and if you have any family members, ask them the same question. Do they eat because they're hungry, or do they eat because they have a hunger that can't be filled? What's the answer? Love to hear from you. Join us here next week on Carren's Couch. Make sure that you go to iTunes, download the podcast and give us a 5-star rating. And also make sure you tell everybody that you know that Carren's Couch rocks. I'm going to see you next week, whether you're an emotional eater or an eater for fuel. I'm going to see you right here on Carren's Couch next week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Bye for now.